Hi, in this lesson I am going to discuss about the knight and pawns against knight endgames. In examining the knight versus pawns endgame, simultaneously we learned quite a bit that is useful about knight endgames. Firstly, because the peculiarities of the knight we learn about there also function here. And secondly, the knight must quite often be sacrificed in order to obtain knight versus pawns endgame. As I have mentioned before, knight endings tend to be less structured than bishop endings. There is certainly no rule for knight and pawn versus pawns that is equivalent to centuries rule for bishop endings. On the other hand, there are still guidelines that you can apply. For example, it's very obvious that the further advanced the pawn, the greater the winning chances. The first thing to note is that a pawn on the 7th rank that is supported by the king and not blocked by the enemy king nearly always guarantee victory. Let's come to the position. Here black got the chance. Despite having the move and the poor initial position of white's knight, there is nothing that black can do to avoid defeat. White will simply improve the position of his knight, finally using it to deflect black's knight away from the defense of the promoting square a8. Let's see how this is achieved. Okay, first move, black plays knight e8. Okay, we can see that king c6 another option, but before playing knight e8 we will go to the king c6 variation. Knight b3, planning to come d4 and e6, king d5, preventing d5 squares diagonally control the knight's improvements. But knight d2, king e5, knight f3 check, king f4, now knight d4. White got two chances because white tried to push away the c7 knight by playing b5 or knight e6. So the knight king c6 is not a good move. Knight e8, knight b3, knight d6, king f8, king c6, knight d4 check, king d7, knight f5, knight d8, king f7, knight c7 and knight g7. Black has to remove the king from. He cannot play the d6 square because knight goes to the e8. It's double attack for the knight and king. So king can't go to the d6 square. King c6, the only option knight d6. Now the black knight is deflecting. Okay, we'll come into the other variations that can play in the game. In the third move, white plays king f8. After that, black can consider about king e6, knight d4 check, and the next move will be knight b5. So black can play king e6 here. Okay, what about knight e8? Same thing, knight c5 check, and black loses the knight. The only move is king c6, now knight d4. Without playing king d6, king d5 can be tried, but knight f3, king e6, knight g5 check, king f6, knight e4, double attack, double check. Without playing king f6, somebody can think about that. King can go d7, same situation again, knight e4, knight e8, knight check. Black loses the knight. As I mentioned from the beginning, if the pawn is in the 7th rank with the support of opponent's king, it is very hard to defeat. Let's see the next position. Here in this position, white's king is very well placed and this is enough to secure a draw, even though move is for a black. Let's see, according to the previous strategy, black is trying to push the white king away and promote the pawn. Let's see. King d3, white plays king d1. Here is knight f5 is wrong because knight g2 check and have to go f1 or d1 pawn push check, and next move will be queen because e1 is already protected by the g2 knight. So here white cannot play knight f5. King d1 is the only move. White must keep his knight controlling the e2 square, otherwise pawn will be promoted. Here. Okay, knight g2, black is controlling these two squares. Now knight e2. Let's see, without playing knight e2, how about king c1? King c1, king d4 can't, knight f5 check, pawn white can take the pawn. Knight h4. Again king d1. Knight f3. King c1. Knight d4. King d1. And black is making no progress because this square is covered by the g3 knight. So knight g2, knight e2. Oscillating with king c1, d1 also works because the knight is so well placed on g3. You may remember that with the pawn on the 6th rank, knight deflection are less likely to work as the pawn is 2 squares away from the promotion. King e4. Black sensible reroutes his king to the f2 square where it supports the pawn's progress and prevents white's king from reaching e1. Okay, let's see how easy it will work or not. Knight c3 check, king f3, knight e2, king f2, knight d4. Knight c3 also okay. Same scenario, controlling the e2 square. Knight d4. Black has seemingly made progress from the initial position. White king is no longer blocking the pawn and now white's king is denied access to the e2 square. However, this is as good as it gets for black. He cannot successfully bust the white knight from d4. King c2. King c1 is blunder because knight e2 check and it's a double attack to the knight and king. Then white have to exchange the knight and white lose the game. So king c2, knight e6, knight cut knight, e2, knight f4, e1 queen, knight d3 check. Okay, that's why here in this scenario knight d4 is a good move, even though knight c3 also can get the same advantage within 2 moves and come into the square within 3 moves. So let's see knight d4, king c2. What happened if king f1? Then knight f5 attacking to the pawn, and the pawn push, knight g3 attacking to the king and pawn, black lose the pawn. And same situation, king e1 also, knight f5 attacking to the pawn, e2, knight g3, then pawn will be gone. According to the previous examples, I hope you have understand what are the simple theories in the knight and pawn versus knight endgames. Generally, the pawn side should deflect opponent's knight or simply trap the opponent's knight. Okay, let's see, not like the previous positions. In this position, white king goes, as we told, one square diagonally away from the knight, which renders the pawn unstoppable. Let's check. Knight d4 check, knight cut d4, king f6. Simply covering these squares to reaching knight. Okay, knight is going to c2 and find other way to come by playing e3 and g4, h5, knight e3, king g5, again covering the square. After this position, once the white plays king f6, black have to play 3 moves to get the knight back into the game. 1, 2 and 3. But when black plays 2 pieces, knight c2, h5, knight e3, king g4, again blocking the reaching the knight. That means white can get an extra tempo by controlling this diagonally way. Then knight won't be able to reach to the pawn. Okay, we will continue the position king knight c2, h5, knight e3, king g5, and black trying to find another way, h6, knight e5, h7, knight f7 check, king f6. Here, in this situation, white using the trapping strategy. Knight h8, king g7, black loses the knight and black king don't have sufficient time to reach the pawn. Okay, let's see this position. In this position, in this example, black wins with careful play. This example, black wins with careful play. Let's see. A3, black pawn have another two squares to from the pawn. Now, obvious and gold. And if I check, king c4, black mustn't allow the knight onto the crucial c3 square, preventing a2. Once, as my first example, once the pawn reaches to the 7th rank, it is very rare that pawn. Okay, knight e3 check, king c3, knight d5 check, the best chance. Knight c3 is strong, a2. It's a typical winning position for the rook's pawn that we will come across more than once. It's easy to see that white is in rook's hand and the pawn will promote. So that knight d5 check, king b2, knight b4 preventing the a2 square for a moment, but unfortunately for him, his king is out of play and the knight on b4 lacks support. Knight c5. Taking the d3 square away from white's knight, which she now plans to harass it. King b3, thus securing the way for a2. King d2, king b3, knight c2, a2. Finally, the pawn reaches its last stop. The final part of the winning procedure is to place white in rook's hand. Let's see, knight a1 check. Before that, we can check king c1, king c3, king d1, knight b3, with the typical winning rook's hand that we have discussed before. Knight have to play e3 or in e1 square or else a3 square. I have to, because the d1 king can't move. You have to leave the c2 knight, then that can take the knight. It's rook's hand win. Okay, let's see that king c1, king c3, king d1, same scenario comes. Okay, a2, after a2, what happened? Knight a1 check, king b2, king d1. Yeah, it's interesting sacrifice, but black don't take because king cut a1, king c1. It's hard to find a way to come out. So knight b3 here. Black don't take the knight because once knight cut b3, king cut b3, the opponent's king is two squares away, so he won't be able to cover the pawn. Knight c2, simply king c3, the position we have discussed before. Okay, let's move into the next position. Wait, in this example, the attacker uses another technique, trapping the enemy knight. Let's see, knight c4, we see knight c2. Here the knight is dominated by the king and knight team. b5, knight e1, b6, knight d3 check, king b5. Again, two squares diagonally from the knight and the pawn promotes. Because the squares are covered by the c4 knight. So knight e2 is strong, knight b1, king d4. b5 is blunted because knight c3. But have to push, otherwise black will take the pawn. Once push the b6, knight f4, double check. White lose the pawn. Knight b1, king d4. Here simply covers the c3 square. Now black knight is helpless. Black resigned because the knight is trapped and there is nothing useful that can be done about the simple idea of king d3 c2. For example, king f5, king d3, king e6, king c2, king d5, knight e3 check, king c6, king cut b1 here. Black cannot play king d4, king cut b1, king cut d3, pawn push. The king is out of the big square of the pawn. So black cannot take the knight. That's why He played king c6, king cut b1, king b5, and white wins. Knight c2, protecting the pawn. Okay, let's move into the next position. Yeah, in this example, black immediately draws by repeatedly attacking the pawn until a fork arises. A common defensive resource. Simply attack into the pawn knight d3, and this game was played in 1994 Lotiev and Karpov at Obeda. After the knight d3, the draw was agreed on account of e6, knight f4, knight 7, knight d5 check, followed by knight cut e7. Okay, well, the final example of knight and pawn versus knight illustrates how tough these endings are to play in practice, even for experienced grandmasters. Let's see knight c7 check in d6. Knight e6 is bad move. This very placeable move is in fact losing because white can use his knight as a deflector. Instead, black can draw with knight e8, king c7, king e7 or d7. Let's play king e7, knight c7, king d7, knight d5, king d6, knight f6. When king c7, met by knight e8 check. No improvement for the white. Let's see king d7, knight f6 check, king e6, knight e8. Same scenario, that is preventing the pawn promotion. Okay, but unfortunately here knight a6 is a blunder by Winley in 2001, played with Antonio. Now white plays knight d7. Now there are ideas of knight c5. In b4, knight b8 and knight c5 also good, knight cut c5, c7. Knight e4 check, in e5. Black don't have chance to stop the pawn. Here, knight b8 also good. Knight cut b8, c7. Black is unable to block the pawn. Yeah, knight c5 also good move, but c7 and b7 check after king d5. That cannot prevent promotion. Hope you have understand the most important techniques when you are playing with knight and pawn versus knight. Let's see in my next lesson I will explain you what are the strategies and what are the types of that you have to consider in knight and two pawns versus knight. Okay, thank you. You may subscribe my channel and click on the bell icon that you can get an alerts about my next video, and I hope my lessons are very important to you improve your chess, as well as you can follow my Facebook page Chess Life 5000 that I will share daily examples especially for the beginners and kids as well as intermediate players. If there's any material you need or any tutorial you want, you can comment in this channel. I'm happy to share the resources what you want. Okay, thank you.